from Group 2 and my name is Renindea.
My name is Aisya.
And my name is Dewi Intan.
And my name is Kudus Satrio.
My name is Adinda Anwar.
My name is Githa Resqina and let's enjoy the video. Thank you.
Number 1. A Detective and the Blacksmith's Brothers. On a snowy winter night, the detective was resting in front of the fireplace. Suddenly, somebody threw a snowball at his window. The heat was so strong that the glass shattered. The detective stood up and had just enough time to notice 3 kids who lived in the neighborhood running away. They were brothers with the names Sam Blacksmith, Peter Blacksmith, and Mark Blacksmith. The next day, a paper note was left on the detective's door. There it was written, "Blacksmith." He threw the snowball. The detective knew immediately which brother to question. Who threw the snowball? Okay, now you have 15 seconds, hopefully enough time to figure it out. The symbol question mark is called the question mark. So here we go. Blacksmith. He threw the snowball. Number 2. Hotel room. A woman was staying in her hotel room when somebody knocked at the door. When she opened it, she saw an unknown man. He looked surprised and said, "I apologize, I thought it was my room." He turned away and went in the direction of the elevators. The woman, however, returned to the room and dialed security. Why was she so suspicious? The woman logically decided that if the man had thought that the room was his, he wouldn't have knocked. Such behavior is typical for these criminals who break into hotel rooms and steal whatever they can. They knock on the door to make sure there's nobody inside. Number 3. Suicide or murder. A detective comes to a crime scene. A man is said to jump out of a window of an abandoned building and commit suicide. The detective goes inside the building to the first floor, to the room at the front. He lights a cigarette, gets up to the window which faces the dead man, opens it and throws the cigarette out. Then he goes to the second floor and does the same. He continues until he has visited all the floors and repeated the action again and again. Then he returns to his team and says that it was by no means a suicide, but murder. How did he find it out? When a person commits suicide jumping from a high floor, they don't tend to close the window behind them. But in this case, none of the windows which faced the dead man were left open. It means that there was somebody who closed them after the man died. Number 4. Iced tea. 2 young ladies were having dinner together. They both ordered iced tea. One of them was very thirsty and drank very fast. She had 5 glasses during the time. The other drank only 1. Tragically, the girl who was nursing her drink and drinking slowly died. The other stayed alive, but it turned out that all the drinks they had been served contained poison. How is it possible that the girl who drank more survived? A strange case. Are you ready with the answer? In fact, the poison was contained in the ice. The ice and the tea of the girl who drank fast didn't have time to melt. But the ice cups and the other girl's drink melted, releasing the poison into her tea. Number 5. Mysterious death in the car. A man was found shot to death in his car. The policemen were puzzled as there was no gunpowder on his clothes or anywhere else in the car. This meant that the person who shot him was outside. But all the windows were closed, all the doors locked, and the only bolt hole was on the man's body. How was it possible? Perhaps some mystic powers? Here's your 15 seconds. The answer is actually quite simple. The car where the man had been killed was a convertible. When the fatal shot sounded, the roof was down. Number 6. Fly in coffee. A woman was having breakfast at a nice restaurant. At one moment, she noticed a fly in her coffee. She was indignant and made the way to bring her another cup of the drink. After he returned with a new cup of coffee, she shouted, "What is the service in this place? You have brought me the same cup of coffee." How did she understand it? Perhaps the woman was a psychic. What do you think? She had already put sugar in her previous cup of coffee. When she tried the new one, it was sweet.
In court for killing the wife. A man is accused of killing his wife. His lawyer in his final statement declares that the wife of the man in fact has not been killed and will enter the courtroom in a minute. Everybody in the room, including the judge and the jury, turns and looks at the door, and the lawyer, with the defendant, looks at them. Several minutes pass, and the lawyer says, "It proves that you are not so sure that my client has killed his wife. Otherwise, you would not believe me." Almost immediately after that, the jury comes up with a guilty verdict. Why does it happen? The man who had been accused was not looking at the door. He was sure his wife would not enter as he had killed her. A case of a smuggler. A man carrying 2 bags with sand crosses the Mexican border on a bicycle every day. Customs officers regularly check the bags, and all the time they contain sand. It is obvious that the man smoked something, but the officers cannot realize what it is exactly. As they don't have any proof, the man crosses the border without interruptions. What does he smuggle? This creative individual distracts the custom officer's attention with the bags of sand, but in fact, he smuggles bicycles. Suicide message. A body of a man was found in the flat. At some moment, he collapsed against his desk, a gun in his hand. The police found a cassette recorder nearby. When they pressed the play button, what they heard was, "I can't laugh like this anymore." Then the sound of a gunshot was heard. However, the detective immediately figured out that it was a murder. How did he realize that it was not a suicide? Surely you already know the answer. If the man had killed himself, he by no means would have been able to rewind the tape. Conclusion: there was someone else. Crime scene. A man killed his wife in their car. He used the knife which he later threw away into an abyss where nobody was going to find it. His wife's body he took out of the car. He was very careful and left no fingerprints. After that, he headed home, and a couple of hours he got a call from the police. They informed him that his wife had been killed, and he had to arrive at the crime scene right away. As soon as he got there, however, he was suspected for the murder. How did the police realize it had been him who was killed? The husband was not informed of the definite location of the crime scene. Despite that, he came to the right place. Jailbreak. Jack is placed in a cell with a dirt floor and only one window positioned so high no one could reach it. This cell is empty except for a shovel. It's hot and dry there, but Jack won't get any food or drink anytime soon. He has only 2 days to break out of the jail. If not, he'll die. We know what you have immediately thought, but not digging. A tunnel is not an option as it will take more than 2 days. So, how should Jack escape the cell? What's your guess? Don't forget, you can pause the video to have more time to think. All set, here's the answer. Well, the way out for Jack turned out to be a piece of cake. He had to use the shovel to make a pile of dirt under the window. climbed on it, and escaped from the cell. A stolen necklace. Mrs. Smith went to the police claiming that her vintage necklace was missing. The woman was upset. When the police arrived, they saw no signs of a break-in, no messed up locks, no misplaced doors, only one window was broken. There was a total mess inside the house and dirty footprints all over the floor. Surprisingly, the next day Mrs. Smith was arrested for fraud. Why? Are you ready there? Here's the answer. The police were sure that Mrs. Smith lied to them because the window was broken from the inside. If it had been broken from the outside, little pieces of glass would have been on the room's floor.
Murder at school. On the first day of the school year, a geography teacher was murdered. The police had as many as 4 suspects. They were the gardener, the math teacher, the coach, and even the school principal. Man, I voted for the principal. Now, the sticking point was that they all had alibis. The gardener was cutting bushes, the math teacher was holding a mid-year test, the coach was playing basketball, and the principal was in the office. Despite this, the killer was arrested immediately. Can you guess who killed the geography teacher and how the police solved the mystery? You have 15 seconds to find the killer. The killer was the math teacher. According to his own words, he was holding a mid-year test, but the crime happened on the first day of the school year. He needs to learn how to lie better, don't you think? A lonely man. A lonely old man lived in his house in the suburbs of the city. He led a quiet life. Perhaps he was a homebody as he never left his dwelling for long. It was a midsummer Friday when the mailman walked by and called out for the man. There was no answer coming from inside the house. The mailman looked into the window and, oh no, saw the man in a pool of blood. When the policeman arrived, he found Tuesday's newspaper, 2 bottles of warm milk, and 1 bottle of cold meat. The next day, the killer was arrested. Do you know how the police found out who it was so quickly? What is your idea, by the way? 5 seconds remaining. Can't you see the answer? It was obviously the mailman. He knew that no one in that house would read a newspaper on Wednesday or Thursday. That's why he came only on Friday. 2 pills. A serial killer had a particular practice going. He kidnapped people and made them take one of 2 pills. One was harmless, the other was poisonous. Whichever pill a victim took, the serial killer took the other one. Then the scene repeated itself continuously. Victims took their pills with water and died. The killer repeatedly survived. How did he always get a harmless pill? Good luck, your time has started. Here's the answer. The serial killer was tricking people. The poison was in the glass of water his victim drank, not in the pill. Oh, that stings, man. So unfair anyway. Frozen windows. Once on a cold winter day, a tragedy happened. John found his friend dead in his own house. John called the police and said he was just passing by Jack's house when he decided to drop by to see him. He had been knocking and ringing the bell for a long time. However, all was silent. Perhaps Jack wasn't at home? But John could very well see the light in the room through a frozen window. He put on the ice window glass and saw Jack on the floor. Unexpectedly for John, the police arrested him as the main suspect. Why? 15 seconds to go. Obviously, John hasn't thought his legend through. He wouldn't be able to unbridge the window glass because it's usually icy on the inside. And finally, chemical substances. A famous chemist was murdered in his lab. There was no evidence found except for a piece of paper with the names of chemical substances on it. On the day he was murdered, the chemist had only 3 visitors: his wife Mary, his nephew Nicholas, and his friend Jonathan. The police arrested the murderer right away. How did they know who it was? A little hint. Pay closer attention to the note. Carbon, oxygen, nickel, lanthanum, and sulfur. The answer is hidden in the note. The piece of paper had a clue. If you combine the short names of the chemical substances on the paper, you will get a name. Nicholas. Even dying, this man remained a real chemist. Speaking of a chemist, here's one for you. Johnny was a chemist's son, but Johnny is no more for what he thought was. H2O was H2SO4, which is of course sulfuric acid. Oops, alright. Good doing it. An unpunished murderer. A woman declares in court that her sister killed her husband. All the evidence up her claim. However, the judge can't punish the murderer. Why not? Your time starts now. So, the problem here is that the women are conjoined twins. So, punishing the murderer's sister will harm the innocent one, and so they're just stuck with each other. Oh, well.
A mysterious death. A young woman is sitting near the window. At first, she's in a deep thought. Then, she suddenly decides to throw something out the window. A couple of minutes later, she's dead. What happened? She was perfectly healthy, no illnesses, allergies, or dependence on any type of medical apparatus. Nobody killed her, and she wasn't suicidal. The cause of her death was the object she threw out the window. It was a boomerang that came back at such a high speed. It hit her in the head and killed her on the spot. I wonder what possessed her to throw it in the first place. Hey, what goes around comes around, you know. What's in the bag? A man is quickly coming up on an open field. He's got a bag with him. If he doesn't open the bag before he reaches the field, he'll be dead. What dangerous cargo is in this mysterious bag? The man is skydiving, and in the bag he has his parachute. The stranger. On a dark and stormy night, a couple is speeding through an unknown town in their car. Suddenly, one of the tires blows, so they have to pull over. Finding no spare in the trunk, the husband sets off to get help. But he's worried about his wife, who decides to stay alone in the car while he's gone. So, to protect her, he rolls up the window and locks all the doors. Upon returning, he sees that the car is in the same condition. But when he looks through the window, he is shocked to see his wife dead, blood everywhere, and a stranger in the car. What happened here? Something messy, of course, but we need details. Now is your time to come up with an answer. There was no crime at all. The woman was in labor. They were rushing to the hospital when the tire blew. So, while the man was away, his wife gave birth to a baby but didn't survive herself. A psychic's prediction. Two men are in a room facing each other. One of the men is a psychic and can see into the future. He predicts that in 10 minutes, the other man will be stabbed in the back. Of course, shocked and paranoid, the latter cannot stop staring at the clock on the wall. And exactly 10 minutes later, he is dead with a knife in his back. How could it happen? After 10 minutes, the man turned around to see if there was anybody behind him. At exactly that moment, the psychic stabbed him in the back. Duh! I'm starting to think he wasn't a psychic at all. A lonely victim. There's a man lying on the ground dead as a doornail. Doornails are pretty dead. His head is split open and every bone in his body shattered. There's not a living creature or building in sight, but there is a bag next to him. So, how did he die? This man was a skydiver who didn't manage to open his parachute. Hey, that's exactly what was in the back lying next to him. Maybe it was the same guy from earlier. They're really not having much luck, are they? A snorkeler in the forest. A young man is lying dead in the forest. Oddly enough, like these aren't odd, he's wearing swimming trunks, goggles, and a snorkel. But the most unusual thing is that the nearest body of water is 15 miles away. So, how did this snorkel die in the forest? Think about it. Well, there was a huge forest fire, and the plane that was extinguishing it had to scoop up water from the lake 15 miles away. Doing this, it accidentally captured the man snorkeling in the lake. He was dropped down together with the water and died. Too bad he didn't have the bag with a parachute.
A simple choice. Upon receiving an anonymous tip, the police rush to a house where a murder suspect is said to be. They have no physical description, but they do know his name is John. When the cops reach the place, they see 4 people playing poker: a carpenter, a firefighter, a truck driver, and a mechanic, none of which have name tags on their uniforms. Without a moment of hesitation, they arrest the firefighter. So, how did they know that's their guy? Your time starts now. The firefighter was the only man in the room. All the others at the poker table were women, and couldn't be named John unless, of course, if they were cross-dresser. But that's outside of the scope of this. The mystery of the locked car. Oh, goody. Here's another locked car. Don't get in the car, lady. It's not going to go very well. Oops. Too late. A man and his wife were driving down the highway when they ran out of gas. So the husband walks to the nearest gas station and is gone for about an hour. Before he heads off, he tells his wife to stay in the car and lock all the doors and windows. Boy, this is not gonna turn out well. I can just feel it. The wife, bored and wanting to entertain herself, turns on the radio only to hear some shocking news. A serial killer has escaped from the prison and was last seen on the very highway where the car is sitting. The reporter on the news gives a very detailed description of the escapee. The wife gets so scared that she quickly turned off the radio. She double-checked all works, but when she looked up, she sees the murder just a few feet from the car. When the man returned, he finds the car still all locked up, but surprise, surprise, his wife is dead inside. Her throat had been slit. How is it possible? The answer is both simple and tragic. The couple had been driving a convertible with the top down. Hey, we didn't say they were stupid. The crime scene. A man murdered his wife in the family car. Do you feel the deja vu here? I'm starting to get the feeling that husband and wife shouldn't ride together in the car. Well, maybe he was a fan of crime shows. because he cleverly disposed of the body in the knife, leaving behind no fingerprints. After taking care of this dirty business, he went home. Some time passed, and he got a call from the police. They told him that they believed his wife had been murdered and he needed to come to the scene immediately to identify the body. As soon as he got there, he was arrested. So, how did the police know it was him if he left no evidence behind? Here, your 15 seconds. Use them wisely. To come up with the answer and ignore that psychic over there with a knife. Gotcha! The thing is that the husband wasn't told where the crime scene was. Despite that, he came to the right place. Very sly police work. Escape. Once a famous detective, Stephenson, had to find an escaped prisoner. He knew the criminal was hiding in one of these houses, but he had to know the exact address so as to not frighten the criminal away. First, he took a photo of the houses with the help of a drone. When he looked at the photo, he realized where the criminal was. So, can you understand where that fugitive was and what helped the detective find him? You have 15 seconds. Your time has started. Are you ready to check your guesses? The murder was in house A. You see, the car standing nearby was the only car parked facing the road. It would let the criminal escape quickly. Detective's tragedy. One morning, the detective had an argument with his wife and went away without his cell phone and the keys. In the evening, when he returned home, he found his colleague, his scared wife, and a murdered man. Stephen's wife told her story. I was sitting in the living room when I heard the doorbell. I thought it was my husband and opened the door, but a criminal pushed me, and so I stabbed him with a knife. The detective ordered the policeman to arrest his wife because she had to plan to kill him. How did the detective figure it out? Time to rack your brain. Unfortunately, Mrs. Stephen indeed planned to kill her husband. She went to open the door with a knife because she thought it was her husband. Friendly murder. Mary and Ben lived with their 4 friends. One day, Ben came home and found Mary dead on a sofa. Bummer! He called the police. The detective arrived and realized that Mary had been killed not so long ago. He interrogated all 4 friends. That's what their stories told. Mia was in the kitchen and said she come home 2 hours ago and gone to the kitchen. John was reading a book in the garden. He said he hadn't left the place that day. Jennifer said she had been swimming in a swimming pool for 3 hours. Jane was painting in her room. Unexpectedly, the detective asked everyone to show him their hands and found out who lied to him immediately. That person was the murderer. How did Stephen uncover the criminal? Time is ticking away. Tick tock. Who do you think the detective was checking? Well, time is out. Hear the answer. Pay attention to the hands of Jennifer. If she had been swimming in the pool for so long, the skin on her palms would have been wrinkled. Oh, Jennifer, your puny hands give you away.
Blood ties. A millionaire was shot in the forehead at his own home. Detective Stevens spoke to the millionaire's three sons, Jack, John, and James, who were at home. Jack said that night John, the father, oh, let me guess, the wife's name is Jane. I'll bet anyway. The father had been at an official reception. They arrived home and entered the living room. His father came in first, then John and Jack himself. When the father came up the stairs, James entered the living room and shot the father. John confirmed Jack's information. James said he had visited his friends that night. When he arrived home, his father had already been dead. The detective understood everything immediately. So, who was the killer? And how did Stevens resolve that case? What do you think? The word of one brother against two others. A tricky case. Or have you already figured out what happened? Let's check if you were right. John and Jack lied. If James had killed their father, a bullet would have shot him in the nape because he wanted to go upstairs. However, the wound was on his forehead. Alright, I was thinking it was Jane. Romantic journey. Mr. and Mrs. Clyde went on a trip to the mountains. But 2 days later, Mr. Clyde returned home alone. He went to the palace and said that Mrs. Clyde had fallen to her death. The next day, Detective Stevens visited Mr. Clyde and arrested him for his wife's murder. Clyde confessed his guilt and asked the detective how he found out he was the murderer. Stevens said he simply called a travel agent and asked for some information. What did the travel agent say to the detective? What is your version? Did it have anything to do with the insurance, perhaps? You have just a few seconds left. Do you know the answer? The words of the travel agent set light on the whole situation. Mr. Light bought 2 plane tickets to the mountains and only 1 return ticket. If only Mrs. Clyde had known to blame the Beatles, she didn't have a ticket to ride. Liar. A man told the police that he had come home from work to find his wife's dead body lying in the middle of the parlor. He said she had apparently found his gun in his desk and shot herself. However, the policeman knew at once that the man was lying. How did he know? 15 seconds is all you have to solve this mystery. The policeman noticed that the man had an empty gun holster attached to his belt. It meant he'd either been about to take the gun with him or had it on him all along. The former couldn't be true because he said he'd come home from work and found his wife dead. That's why we are left with the latter, not the latter, which proves that the man had actually shot his wife. Silly murderer. The detective was speaking to a doctor in a waiting room when a dismayed man rushed in and screamed, "Somebody shot my wife!" The detective asked the man to tell him everything. The man, Mr. Clark, said that he was at work when his housekeeper called him and said that something terrible had happened to his wife and that she was in the intensive care unit. He hung up immediately and went to the hospital. When Mr. Clark finished his story, the detective arrested him on the attempted murder charge. Why did he do this? Can the detective read minds? What is your opinion? You have just a few seconds left to make your guess. In fact, Mr. Clark didn't know anything about the shot. His housekeeper only said that something bad had happened to his wife. No firearm had been mentioned. By the way, are you also keeping count of how many couples are killing their spouses? So much spouse aside, what does this say about our society? Well, firstly, the killer all screw it up, but I digress. The murder of an aristocrat. George Smith was murdered on Sunday evening. There were 5 other people in his house. Mr. Smith's wife, I'm betting she did it, his personal cook, a butler, a housemaid, and a gardener. They all told Detective Stevens what they were doing that evening. Mrs. Smith was reading a book near a fireplace. The cook was making breakfast. The butler was giving instructions to the workers in the living room. The housemaid was washing the dishes. The gardener was watering plants in the greenhouse. Right after all the conversations, the detective arrested the murderer. Who was the killer, and how did Stevens find the criminal? Will you be able to solve this riddle in 15 seconds? If you want more time to consider this case, you can always pause the video. Well, what is your answer? The criminal was the cook. Of course he was. I knew that all the time the murder was committed in the evening, but he said he was making breakfast.